Hello and welcome to Anatomy of Us. I'm your host, Melanie Studley. My husband, Seth Studley, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, is not here today. He's actually at work with his clients, but I wanted to take some time and talk about the topic of how people heal. I think this is a really important topic that people don't really talk much about. We talk about the problems that we have. We talk about what it's like to be healed, but people don't spend a ton of time actually talking about what the middle process of that journey looks like. And I love to use the analogy of a physical injury and comparing it to healing. There's a couple different analogies that I'm going to use today as we talk about this process, but I think it's really important, again, to have this discussion, to have this conversation so that we can have a better understanding of what the healing process looks like. And that could be healing for anything. It could be healing a parent-child relationship. It could be healing a relationship to yourself, how you view yourself. If you have an injury, almost like a wound in your mind or your heart about how you view yourself. We can talk about how we heal in that process. Of course, healing in a marriage from any type of, whether there's infidelity or mistrust or abuse or whatever, healing, all sorts of things. It applies to a bunch of different things. But I just want to talk about the process of it and what we get wrong when it comes to healing and how we can begin to get things right so that we can begin to have healing in our lives. So there's two big analogies that I want to use when it comes to healing. The first one is healing from a physical injury. So I don't know if you've ever had trauma, like a wound or a car accident or a surgery or whatever. There is a process when we go to heal from things like that is unavoidable. It is the process of physically healing, right? And I'm going to tell a story. If you are queasy, if you're the type that faints easily, don't listen to this part of the show. Just know that I hurt myself. But if you want to hear a juicy story, stay tuned. So a few years ago, I was cutting a tree with an electric chainsaw, and my husband, who shall not be named, told me that I had enough slack and I could do it. And it was a corded chainsaw, meaning it was plugged in. It wasn't a gas powered chainsaw. And I was like, I don't think that I do. I think if I pull this and the branch cuts, I might be in a bad spot. But he's like, nah, you got this. But anyway, so I go ahead and I cut this branch, and it did exactly what I thought it was going to do. And I should have just trusted my instinct, but no, here we are. The branch fell, hit the cord that was plugged in and was like super tight that Seth was actually pulling to give me slack. It hit that cord. And the way that an electric chainsaw, the way it was oriented to the cord and the outlet, it actually pulled the bottom of the chainsaw away from me, which meant that the working end of that chainsaw came right at my face. This is a miracle of the Lord. I do not know how. I honestly, this is like an angel divine intervention moment. This chainsaw whipped around like lightning speed because it was whipping around because a branch hit the cable. And it actually cut my hand open. It cut my middle finger from the top knuckle, like the knuckle that connects to your hand, to my middle knuckle where you bend your finger at, right? It's right here. It went right down, literally cut my finger to the bone. I was looking at my actual bone. Now, here's the crazy part about, again, I'm just going to tell this story because I can't believe that it happened to me. Number one, I could have lost an eye. I could have lost part of my face. I could have cut my shoulder. I mean, this was so dangerous. I can't even believe it. But all that happened was that I cut my hand open. But on top of that, it cut my hand open and didn't hit the bone. It cut directly to it, but it didn't hit the bone, didn't hit a nerve, didn't hit any tendons. Literally almost the least amount of possible damage humanly possible from a flipping chainsaw. And it's literally was shocking. And the coolest part is that all my kids were standing right there. So they all saw it, right? So they saw Mom holding a chainsaw, and all of a sudden it whips around. It hits her. She sets it down immediately and just starts pouring out blood. And I didn't cry or anything. I was just like, I got to be really chill because this is not awesome. But anyway, that was my injury. And I'm telling you that story because the healing process from that injury paints a beautiful picture of the healing process emotionally and relationally that happens in our spirit and our body, in our mind as we heal in our marriages. And again, this could apply to anything, parent, child, any type of relationship, but it's just a beautiful illustration of healing. And the other visual I'm going to use is sort of the the second part of it when you are healed and you're wanting to get better at stuff. And that's an analogy of learning how to drive a stick shift, but I'll get there. So just wait. So right now we're going to talk about the chainsaw wound and how we heal in marriage. And that's the first one we're going to go with. So as we work with clients, so Seth and I do high performance marriage coaching. We walk with clients through whatever they're going through. That could be infidelity. That could be it could be so many things. Financial infidelity. It could be we just want to become tougher and stronger. We just want to have blah, blah, blah. We want to heal from this family of origin trauma. We want to do whatever. So as we work with clients, we see this huge gamut, this huge array of how people need to heal. But it always comes down to the same like 5 things, right? So when, again, I'm going to take this emotional healing right here and we're going to set this physical healing like storyline right in front of it so that we can see the similarities, because it's so much easier to see physical healing than it is to see emotional healing. And because we can't see emotional healing, we sometimes, number 1, don't think it's happening. Number 2, don't think it's working, all of those things. So we're going to take these 2 images and set them side by side. So let's just come up with an example. Let's say that a couple has had a season of deep misunderstanding. Let's say there was some type of like a trust breach. So I'm making up a scenario that, let's say the husband thought that the wife was okay with him looking at porn. And so he had been, but the wife didn't realize that that's what was going on. And she's not okay with it. And so let's say for 2.5 years, this happened where the wife was completely unaware that he was looking at pornography. And the husband was like, oh yeah, she totally thinks it's fine. One day she finds out, she freaks out. He doesn't know what's happening because he thought it was fine, right? He didn't know that this was something out of bounds in their marriage. And all of a sudden they're in crisis. And that kicks off a season of just like everything was a lie. Everything that he says is inaccurate. She's questioning all of it. He's just thinks she's being mad at everything all the time. And it just creates this like dumpster fire of pain and miscommunication and confusion and all of the things. And so let's say that that's our pretend scenario. How do we heal from that? Oh my goodness. Okay, now again, we're going to take our visual of chainsaw Melanie and we're going to lay it over this family scenario with his husband and his wife trying to heal. Okay, the first thing that I did when I cut my hand open with that chainsaw was I got my butt to the emergency room. Actually, Seth did because I literally couldn't drive. I want to say so many gory details, but it's like really gross. But I kind of want to say them. I'll say them. If you're squeamish, do not listen to this next part. So number 1, there's a thing that happened. I had always, as a child, secretly wanted to know what it would look like if you saw your own bone. So I got kind of got my wish. Okay. I wasn't mad. About it. I was a little surprised that I cut my hand open with a chainsaw, but I was also secretly excited that I got to look at my own bone, which was beautifully clean. It was so clean. I was so impressed with my own self. But anyway, the first step was getting to the emergency room. And what I discovered was this gaping wound. Again, this is a really gross part. Skip it if you're squeamish. My, like your finger, the skin holds it onto your finger. It's really gross. Like your skin is holding itself like a little sausage casing around your bone. And when you cut that much, I mean, it was more than half of my finger was cut open, like from, the knuckle to the knuckle was totally cut open. And the skin was like pulling it was literally like I could have just pulled it off if it wasn't attached in different spots. It was the grossest, weirdest thing I had ever seen. Like the skin was like pulling away. So the very, very, very first thing I had to do was prop it up, like literally push the skin back up, squeeze it together so no dirt got inside of it. So in a way, I was like protecting this cut. Not in a way, I actually was protecting this cut from any further damage. Like, stop everything. I'm not going to open a door with this hand. I'm not going to like brush my hair with this hand. I have to just protect the living daylights out of it because it could get 1,000 times worse than it already is if I don't. Okay. So that's the first thing I did was I went into protection mode. So we're going to go back to this scenario of couples. He's looking at porn, doesn't know it's a problem. She finds out it's a really big problem. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to protect that. We're going to get to the ER of our marriage and we're going to protect it. So the ER of your marriage could be therapy, obviously. So right out of the gate, what I would do if I was like thinking of how do you handle this in relationship to chainsaw hand, right? The first thing is find a therapist to go to. That could be at a church. Also, you could go to a church counselor, a marriage counselor. Look for a resource. Okay. So you have BetterHelp. You can go to betterhelp.com. I think / us, anatomy of us. I don't even know. But you can go to BetterHelp and use our promo code that you'll hear somewhere throughout this podcast. You could go to coaching. You can call us, right? You can go to anatomyofus.com and sign up for coaching. Literally work with us in your crisis. But the first thing that you need to do is look for help. You need to look for help. Not like, oh, has my mom ever dealt with someone chainsawing their hand open? Maybe, but that's not who you go to. You go to a professional if you are in a moment of crisis in your marriage. Now, let me take a second to talk about what is crisis in your marriage. Anything that has dysregulated you so much that you feel out of balance. There's like constant fighting. There's either shutting down all the time. Nobody's talking. We aren't touching. We're not happy. We don't have sex. We're just angry all the time. Someone's bitter. Someone's hurt. Someone leaves all the time. Someone hides. These are crisis moments. Even if it's been happening for 5 years, it's a crisis. Okay. So go get help. That's your very first step. I went to the ER in Covington for my finger, and I want you, if you're in a crisis moment, to either contact us at hello@anatomyofus.com or go to betterhelp.com, go to your local church marriage ministry, go to something, find a counselor near you immediately, and just begin the process. So then here's the next step. When you get to that person, so for me, it was the like triage room of the Covington multi-care ER or whatever. When you get there, the very first thing they did with me, again, if you're squeamish, do not listen. This is gross. So they looked at my hand. Number one, they said it was beautiful how clean the cut was and that it didn't chip bone and it didn't hit my eye, so I felt kind of cool about that. But the second thing that they did was they went, okay, well, we're going to have to clean this sucker out. And thank the Lord above, that rusty, dusty chainsaw somehow did not leave the dirtiest cut on the planet. It was clean. It was a beautiful, clean cut. But anyway, the very first thing they said is we're going to have to clean this out and it's going to hurt. I was like, dang it. But I've had enough injuries in my day to know that I don't want an infection because infections hurt longer and more, right? And so I knew I'm going to have to sit here while this lady, number one, she's going to jab a needle into my finger to help it hurt a little bit less. And then she's going to like flush it out. It was so gross. Flush it out with, again, sorry if you're squeamish. She's going to flush it out with water. She's going to do all this stuff. Oh, and I just knew. So I'm sitting there going, well, this is not going to be ideal. This is going to be hard. It's going to hurt. It's going to look gross. And I don't know. I got to like sit here. I don't have really any other options. My hand skin is falling off my finger bone. That was a funny sentence. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I'm knowing that she's going to have to clean it out. So again, we're taking our couple, overlay it. They're in the emergency room. They found the couples therapist. They went to the church counselor. Next step is we got to clean that wound. Oh my gosh. And really what you do when you clean a wound is you figure out what's in there. So in my case, I was cutting down a tree branch. There could have been sawdust in there. There could have been oil from the chain. There could have been dirt from the chain. There could have been any number of things, grass cuttings, leaves, I don't know, all the sorts of things that happen when you get an injury. There could be all sorts of things. Like if you get in a car accident, there's glass all over you, stuff like that. You just don't know until you get in there. And it hurts. It hurts. I've also had a terrible car accident when I was 9. It hurts to get in there and go, what's wrong with you? Like what's really wrong? And you got to start pushing and poking and moving and it hurts. And your instinct as a person with a body that you want to protect is to, like you want to just shrink around it and be like, don't touch me like that. Don't do that. And you just like tighten up and tense up because you don't want to get hurt more. But again, in this scenario, you've got to get in there to dig out the garbage that's in that cut. Look at what you're dealing with in order to even begin the healing process or even the next steps. We're not even healing yet, right? So with our couple, we're going to start, your therapist is going to start asking questions, right? How did this start? Tell me your background, blah, blah, blah. What kind of family did you grow up in? And they're asking these questions because they want to really get into the sort of core of the core of who you guys are. So the anatomy of who you are as a couple, but then also the core of the wound. And it's different with each couple and each person because each person brings to this marriage a different set of everything, expectations, ideas, family of origin influences. Everything is different for every couple. So there's not ever a one size fits all solution, just like in a physical body. Like if I had cancer and cut my finger open with a chainsaw, that changes everything for how they try to go about healing that, because that impacts everything, right? So each couple has to be looked at, each person in the couple has to be looked at while they're digging into that injury, right? And it's hard. Again, I'm just telling you because I think people don't understand. They don't understand what the healing process is like. And so when they get into it, they bail because they're like, this hurts way too much. Like, no, that's the point. Like, that's the point. We're cutting out the cancer. We're getting out the wood chips that are in that saw cut. Like, we have to do this or else it'll get worse, right? And so what's interesting is I've discovered I have it sounds really weird, but I've had a lot of accidents growing up, and I have a very low tolerance for people getting frustrated when you're doing that sort of like pre-healing work, because without it, everything gets worse. And I'm like, just like buck up and do it. Like, just deal, because this is going to be the stage that when you get through it, you're going to finally be able to start the process of starting to heal, right? But you have to be able to tolerate poking and prodding and looking and examining and x-raying and, all of the things that takes. So again, you're going to find that therapist, or you're going to work with me and Seth, and we're going to start poking around in there, and we're going to start looking at stuff and going, okay, well, what is in that cut? What was the reason you were looking at pornography? Why is it so scary to you? Why did it hurt so bad when he said this? Or why does it feel like such a whatever? And we're going to start asking all these questions, and none of it's going to be comfortable, right? Same thing with your therapist. If you don't work with us, it might be your counselor at church. Same thing. We're going to ask questions, and it's going to be really uncomfortable. But this is one of the most important parts, is to get to the root cause and get out any little tiny bits that might cause infection down the road. Because if you leave them in there and you don't take them out and you just try to sew up that cut, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have surgery again. You're going to have to cut it all back open when it gets infected because you didn't clean it out. Okay. So this first phase, people really don't like how it feels because number one, it doesn't feel like healing. People sign up for coaching or they do counseling and they think, well, I'm going to go to the office. I'm going to say a few things. I'm going to feel really good when I come out. That's not what happens. That isn't what happens. So expect that won't happen, right? It is to be expected that you will go to the doctor's office with a traumatic injury and you will hurt worse when you leave, but you're on the path to feeling better, right? Again, therapy, counseling, coaching, it's all the same concept, just slightly different, right? So we're going to go in there, we're going to look, we're going to start digging around and seeing what's in there. And then the next step is cleaning out the wound. Like, you're actually having to clean it out. And this, again, in the physical sense, they flush stuff out, which means they fill it. Like in my case, again, if you're queasy, stop listening. But what they did was I think they put lidocaine in, I think is what it's called. It's like a painkiller. I'm not a doctor, but they like shot lidocaine all over around the big giganto cut. And then they went in and flushed it out with, I think, just saline. I have no idea. Just like a big needle of saline-y water. It's just like water, right? But it was shocking, number one, because it swelled up like huge. Like my finger, I have pictures of it. If you want to see, you can DM me. But both sides of the cut were like massive because they filled it with water and saline to get out any of the impurities. So it's like think of like if you had a big bucket of water that was dirty and you just decided, well, I can't dump out the water. I've got to just flush it out with all of this other water. So it takes a ton of water comparatively to what was in the bucket originally, but that's a way to flush out the dirty water and put in new water, right? That's what they did to my finger. They just flushed it out with all of this saline and water, and it made it swell. It was so weird. It was just like super weird to watch. It was painful, even though I had lidocaine. It wasn't the worst pain ever because it's a numbing agent, thank goodness. But that is the next step in the healing process of a relationship. Again, this could be parent-child. It could be you talking to your 13-year-old and you go to counseling. And they've got to, number one, they do their initial, you're holding it all together. You're doing your assessment. Is there dirt in there? Why is this like this? Tell me all your backstory, blah, blah, blah. But now we're going to inundate it with health and knowledge and wisdom and ideas and concepts. And we're going to throw as many things at you, as much sort of flushing out water as we can to clear out the blockages, to clear out any potential infectious things that might be in there. And it's going to feel like a lot. Like you're like, okay, can we be done with this part now? But no is the answer, right? You have to infuse again, in my case, my finger wound, with clean, healthy water, saline to get all of the bad stuff out. So there's that saying we talk about, you can't erase, you have to replace. It wouldn't be enough for them just to pick the dirt specks out of my finger and then just sew it up. That's not enough to ensure that infection doesn't take place, right? So they pick out all the dirt bits, flush it with water, and then sew it up, right? So there's a process, there's an order to it that helps ensure that on the other end of this, I'm going to have the healthiest, not infected finger possible. Okay. And again, when this is overlaid into a relational clinical therapy perspective, you're looking at the wound, you're digging in there, you're picking out the things that potentially could really cause infection, like, bitterness, anger, whatever. And then we're going to just flush it full with as many positive, helpful analogies, books, anything we can think of. Again, I'm saying we, like Seth and I, when we do coaching work, but we're going to fill your head and your soul and your spirit and your mind with as many positive, helpful things as we can, because they'll begin to stick and work and flush out the bad things. So a good example is, like, if you have a really crappy mindset, like you just are the most negative person ever, you cannot heal. There's just no way. There's no way that negativity turns into healthy, fun-loving marriage. It doesn't. Okay? I know this from experience. I tried and it doesn't work. And so it is our job to flush out that negativity, but you can't just try to flush it out and hope that that's enough. You've got to replace it with positivity, with books that are helpful, with resources, with podcasts, with anything, with practices, with our planners, like anything that you can. You have to infuse it with healthy, life-giving resources in order to begin that healing process really growing and sort of taking it to the next level. So again, with my finger, they flushed it all out, and they're making sure it's just like super, 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 super clean. Same thing with the relationships. Flush it all out. We can't have bitterness. We can't have judgment. We can't have scorekeeping, right? We can't have gossiping with your, like your buddies when you're off at the bar, and then expect that you're going to have this like fruitful, beautiful marriage. You've got to cut all of those things out, clean all of them out, and then replace them with things that are life-giving, helpful to your marriage, helpful to your relationship. So I hope that makes sense. The next step in the journey of finger healing, again, queasy, pause. The next step is stitches. I got 12 stitches in my finger. That's a lot for one finger. But stitches, okay, I'm going to say again, if you're queasy, just don't. But I love the doctor's office because doctors have saved my life way more than one time. And so I'm not afraid of the doctor because, I know that there are bad doctors out there, but I haven't run into one, and my doctors have saved my life. And so I watch what they do and I stay curious. It also helps me not have anxiety, just like side note. But when they did my stitches, I was just fascinated because I sew. Right? I am a sewer. I can make clothes. I can make anything. I can make cushions for a couch. I can make quilts. I can literally could make an entire garment from scratch and have. And I was like, how is she going to do this? Like, what is the thread she's going to use? How is she going to tie the knot? What is it? Like, I was just totally drawn into this whole process as I was watching her do it. And it was just fascinating. I don't know. I hope that I have other people out there like me who, so don't look like I'm a crazy lady, but I thought it was fascinating. So I watched her sew my hand closed. And at first, I'm not going to lie, I was watching her. And what's funny is that my tattoo it went right next to the L on my hold fast knuckle tattoos, right? So it went right next to the L, and it actually made the bottom line of the L like slightly crooked. And I noticed it while she was sewing, and I was like, I wonder if that's going to straighten out. I don't imagine it will straighten out. Like, should I tell her it's crooked? But that's not the point, right? But as I was watching her sew it back up, I remember thinking, like, this looks way, way worse than I thought it was going to look. Like, when she sewed it, what I thought would happen is it would look like really tidy and neat and like little. I don't know. I just thought it would look like you took two pieces of fabric and you sewed them. But what I didn't realize, again, if you're queasy, I'm really sorry. I'm going to say something so gross. What I didn't realize It was like if you took two pieces of like nigiri sushi and sewed them together next to each other. You are not making that beautiful. It was so gross looking. That might ruin sushi for some people forever. And I am so sorry. Pretend you never heard that. Erase and replace that with a different thought in your mind. Let's say I said it looked, I can't. It's too late. But anyway, it looked crazy. It did not look like it would ever heal. Ever. And I was like, well, this is going to be awful forever, like a horrendous, huge, ugly thing. But what can you do? My other option is bone finger being there all the time. That sounded weird. So anyway, she sewed it up and I was like, okay, well, there I go. This like janky, crusty, musty, crooked finger going, and it looked awful. And it was so sensitive. Oh my gosh. I had it like, I braced my whole hand, cause you can't bend, you can't do anything. You can't press on something because little do you know that all your skin moves when you push on anything. If you turn a doorknob, your skin moves. All the skin on your hand moves, but you don't know that until you have cut yourself to the bone with a chainsaw, right? Chainsaw lessons with Melanie. But anyway, so I had to protect it, and it was so much grosser than I thought it was going to be. Like, meaning the first pass of the stitches, all of that was just like, what is this mess? She left me with a hot mess. Now, this is what it's going to be like when you go through coaching or counseling. You're going to be like, wait, what is this hot mess? Like, I got 55 stitches and I still look like this? Yeah. It's kind of a bummer, huh? But you're not going to get an infection. You're going to most likely guarantee that you can gain full functioning of the hand in this, in my hand is what I'm talking about. Your marriage can be restored. Your relationship with your kid or whatever it is can be restored so that it can function. Just like my hand, right? But first you got to have these ugly stitches. You got to have something that holds you together, even when it looks like two pieces of sushi and it doesn't look like it ever is going to heal right. You have to have something holding you together. The stitches were holding my hands together, not my hands, my finger skin together, so that it would heal to each other, right? So that one side would heal to the other side. Without those stitches, ain't nothing healing. It's just going to be the worst thing ever. I'll probably lose my hand because it'll get infected. So your stitches in your sort of metaphor of healing in therapy, I believe, are your therapist. And it's so ugly for a while. Like, for a while, it's a hot dumpster fire mess. And you think there's no way on God's green earth that I can redeem this and make it amazing, beautiful, attractive, look like it was never there in the first place, right? But do I have news for you? You can, and it does, and it will, and you will, okay? But those stitches are necessary. And one of the things that I talk about with our clients is that we'll go through the whole process, right? We assess the damage. We get you into the ER. We take out the little bits that we know will cause infection. We start flushing it out. And then we get to the stitches, and they want it to be way prettier than it is. By the time they get those stitches, they're like, wait, I thought it would be better. I thought we would be farther. I'm like, oh, no, you're far. You just don't realize it yet. And then the worst thing that they do is they start taking out the stitches. They start going, well, I didn't want it to be ugly like this. I wanted it to be better. So I'm going to fight with you about this. I'm going to argue with my wife again. I'm going to blah. And it's just like pulling apart these two pieces of like my skin on my hand, right? You're just pulling it apart. And guess what we're going to have to do again the next time we meet? We're going to have to stitch it all back up. And does getting stitches feel good? No. Does getting stitches twice in the same spot in the same month feel good? No. But so many couples do this. They undo all their growth because they're not used to, number one, what it feels like to be healthy. They don't know how to do it. So they undo it because dysregulation, disintegration feels better than being healthy to them, because that's what they know. They don't know regulation. They don't know integration. They don't know balance. And so they actually pop those stitches out and try to create chaos. Even though they say they want a better marriage, they'll create chaos because they're used to it. And then we have to go back in there and do all that stitching over again, right? Again, you're repeating an injury. I've actually had this happen. I won't tell you how it happened because it was related to birthing. So ladies, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But I have had to have a set of stitches put in, taken out, and put in again in the same 30-minute time span. And it was not ideal. And it wasn't on my hand. We can talk about that a different time because it's kind of a funny story. Not funny at all, but it taught me a lesson, right? 2 sets of stitches in 30 minutes is not ideal or fun. But I say that again to tell you, this is what healing looks like. Oh my gosh, this is what healing looks like. It's like this uncomfortable, you're so close, like these stitched together pieces of skin, you're so close, but it still looks ugly and weird and messy and blah, right? And then the next phase of healing is probably, to me, what feels like the hardest part. It's the like the stitches and the digging the stuff out takes like a few hours. This next phase of healing takes, I don't know, months, 6 months maybe. And I'm going to tell you the next phase is when the actual healing happens. Like as of now, from injury to cleaning to flushing to stitching, that's not actually healing. That's cleaning. That's prepping. That's preparing for healing, but it's not healing yet, right? Over here is the healing side of things. And that is where, if you've ever had a serious injury or a surgery or a really big trauma, you understand how weird healing is. Like you think you just start to feel better and better and better and better every day, but that is not how it works. Number one, depending on the type of injury or wound or whatever, your body has trauma that it has to process that has literally almost nothing to do with the injury itself. So like your psychology, your brain, your heart, your spirit is like, I just went through something. I went through a trauma and I have to process all the chemicals that come with that. So I was in a car accident as a kid that caused injuries, but also that caused trauma, right? So like PTSD, right? You're having to deal with that on top of trying to heal the actual skin of your hand, right? When I cut my hand open with a chainsaw, I nearly passed out. It was so weird because I didn't cry. I knew I'd be fine. I was just like so thankful. I'm like, oh my God, thank you that I live so close to a hospital, that people are here, that I'm not alone, that it wasn't 1,000 times worse. And I was like, okay, I just got to get up to our house and I got to get in the car and I got to get whatever. And I just, at one moment, I just was like, I have to sit down. Like I'm going to just pass out. And it wasn't from like blood loss. It was like my whole body went, girl, you're going to die. Like stop, like full stop. And so it was just a weird moment of like, everything in my cognitive mind was telling me, you're fine. Get up to the car. Seth's going to take you to the hospital. You'll be totally fine. A few stitches. You'll be back home at the end of the day. But my body was like, oh, this is fight, flight, freeze, right? You like shut down, just shut down. Don't get injured anymore. If you're bleeding like that, something could get you. Like it was just the weirdest thing ever. So this next phase of healing, after you've gotten your stitches and you do all that, is when you're actually dealing with the trauma of the event. And again, sometimes the event is 6 years of your marriage being lied to, or 6 years of trauma, or 2 weeks of, you lost a whatever. There's just a million things that it could be, right? And this is where we actually really start to heal it. But we're healing it in a couple different realms at the same time, right? So you're healing the trauma within yourself, right? Again, that's me with my hand, the endorphins, all of that. You're healing, you're trying to process that. You're also trying to process repairing something. So in my case, repairing my fingers, and in a relationship case, repairing a broken marriage. So you're that smushed together, stitched up marriage that seems destined to look terrible forever, and you're trying to heal it while also healing all these other things. And so a lot of people don't realize how much, I would say, like how much grace you need in this time frame, how much actual like love and care and kindness. And if you know a friend who's going through something hard in a marriage, like attune to that, help them go the extra mile. My mom would come over to clean my house when I cut my hand open because I couldn't do anything, and it was my right hand, right? I couldn't write. I couldn't wring out a towel. I couldn't do the dishes. I couldn't do my hair. It was so hard to do absolutely anything, like literally anything. I had to do everything with my left hand. I would try to do stuff with my right hand and it would hurt so bad. And so if you're a friend of someone going through a trauma like this, and you have this information and maybe they don't, number one, share this episode with them and help them out. But number two, help them out, right? Like actually help them, because this is so much for us to process and we're not meant to process things alone. So as we're going into this healing part, this like the real healing part, what you don't realize is that, again, healing is weird. It takes forever, and it's done in these different layers. So like when I was healing from my finger cut, I could actually feel it. It's so weird. And this is same thing with other surgeries. I've had multiple surgeries. I had my appendix removed. I had my spleen removed from trauma and accidents and infections. I've had all sorts of different surgeries on like my teeth when I was a kid. Like my eye teeth were growing at each other instead of down. What is even that? So I had like oral surgery when I was young. I've had lots of surgeries, but what's gross about it is that you can feel inside of your body, like in the layers of your dermis, your skin, where it's healing. So it's not just all healing at the top. There's like layers to it and you can feel it. And when I mean feel it, I mean it hurts. Like you can feel that it hurts, right? And I want you to think of this analogy, overlay it with a relational analogy. Like when you're trying to heal a marriage, let's say you've been married for like 7 years or whatever, or 8 years or whatever I said earlier, I can't remember. And you're trying to heal all of these things at one time, right? So there's the trauma of being lied to. There's the trauma of realizing, oh my gosh, my husband's looking at porn. I can't believe that. Like there's guilt, there's shame, there's, I should have known. There's all of this like whole suite of things that come with that. And as you're on your healing journey, they're all, we think of them all as the same thing at the same time, kind of just like in one big bundle of a person, but they heal at different times within the sort of space and time of healing. And so one thing might start to heal over here and it hurts for a second. You're like, what is that? Why am I thinking that? I'm supposed to be healing and I'm supposed to feel better and I'm supposed to be able to use my hand. But all of a sudden I'm crying. All of a sudden I feel lonely when I thought yesterday that I was going to feel really comforted, but now I feel lonely. Like, what's this all about? And so again, to kind of paint a more full picture of what it really looks like to heal, it's not just like a one and done process. It's so many processes done over an extended amount of time. And at any point in that extended amount of time, you can undo any one of those things that you're working on healing by just unstitching that part or overextending it or trying too hard or moving too fast. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So when my hand was healing and it, well, first of all, let me talk about this. Healing a wound, like a big giant cut on your hand, it itches. It's awful. It's the weirdest thing ever. And it itches and it hurts. And you're like, why? Why would it itch? If you're a doctor and you know why a wound itches, tell me, because I'm so curious about this. But it's so awful because what do you think happens if you scratch it? You get hurt again, like 100 times more. And you worry about getting an infection and you can screw up the scar. There's so many things like, why would it itch? It's just so deeply frustrating to me. But in that process, it hurts on its own. Like you're healing and it hurts on its own. And it's so annoying and so frustrating and so painful, right? But you begin to see that you can do a little tiny bit more each day. And I mean a little tiny bit more, right? Like I could maybe, I don't know, move my finger, but I certainly couldn't bend it. I had to have a brace on it for, I don't know, probably months, weeks for sure. But I probably wore the brace for months because every time I would try to bend my finger or bend it accidentally or bend it without thinking, it would actually pop. I would pop stitches in a different part. So one of the things that you have to realize is that if I would go too fast to, I'll use this example, opening a doorknob, like a round doorknob. To do that, it moves all the skin on your fingers. Like you don't know it until you know it. And it moves all the skin on your fingers. And so I would forget that I had an injury because I'm, taking in groceries or getting kids or driving them wherever or getting the dog. And you just, you're so used to functioning in a certain way. So I would just like go to grab the doorknob and I would be met by just this intense pain of like, oh, I cannot believe I did that. Oh my gosh, it hurts so bad. And I would just have to stand there and like, sometimes I'd have to hold my hand up in the air and do nothing. And my kids are like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, it just hurts like so bad right now. And the only thing I can do is to be still, right? I can't try more and have the pain go away. That will only make it worse than it is, right? So it's very similar to healing in a marriage. If you have this trauma, this wound, this injury, you've got the stitches, you're doing all the things, give yourself months, and I mean months, like more like a year, to be able to do, number one, the things that you were able to do before, but like the right things, right? The healed things. Give yourself at least, 9 months, a year. And note if you push, if you don't mean to, if you're accidentally pushing a little too hard, pay attention and pull back and say, oh, wait, I can't do that. I can't do that. Now, this does not give anyone license to take a year to heal if it takes 2 weeks to heal from like a sliver is not the same thing as a chainsaw cut. Okay. So just to be really clear, there are, there's like a scale to these things. And you cannot use this as a default setting for all types of healing because it does not apply to all types of healing. But I think it would be really wise if you have a big trauma in your life, in your marriage, in your relationship or whatever, to set a timeline for healing, but know the steps along the way, right? If we think healing's going to be like, if we think healing is just like growth, we're wrong, right? Healing is not the same thing as like planting a garden and just waiting for it to grow. No, healing is like ripping up the earth, tearing all of it out. Healing's like planting a garden where there used to be lawn. If you've ever had to cut out grass, you know how hard that is. If you live in Washington State, where there's rocks every 2 seconds, you know how hard that is, right? So it's not like that. It's not this like super easy process that you just go, oh, like, well, I'm just healing now. No big deal. Like it's really complicated and it's really kind of clumsy at some points. And in some ways it's clumsy, but I wanted to take the time to talk about what the process of healing looks like, because when we don't know what it looks like, we think it's not working when we're in the middle of it. We actually, especially when we do coaching with clients, for some reason they think it's going to be just positive the whole time. That's not how it works. We work with you until we hit those negative points, and then that's where the healing begins, because that's where the injury is. The injury is in those negative spaces. So it's not only positive things that are going to work to heal it. It's digging in there. It's opening it up. It's flushing it out. It's like putting in new information and filling it up with healthy and life-giving things, and then stitching it and then making sure it stays there. Seth and I have to hold it together, or your counselor or your whatever therapist is there to help you hold it together close enough so that it starts to heal. Again, just like stitches in a wound, they're there to hold the skin the skin wants to heal. But if it's not close enough to heal, it will just scar over and get infected. But if you can hold it close enough to heal and protect it and keep it safe and keep it to treat it gently, then it will do the right thing. It will heal. Like that is how we are designed. And that's another thing I think is so beautiful about this process, is that if you're willing to put in the work, your divine nature, the way that God has created you, and the way that God has created us all, is that we actually want to heal. It's our desire to heal. That's why we feel it when things are wrong. We feel it when stuff isn't right. It's because whole, healthy, healed is our desired end goal. It's what we were made for, right? So again, the stitches are there to hold you close enough so that you can heal the right way. But you must allow time for that process, and you must allow yourself to be transformed in that process, right? So for example, with my hand, now it's been, 3 years or 2, something like that, years, multiple years. You really almost can't see it at all. The only way that I have any type of wound or injury or scar on my hand, number one, is you can kind of see the scar like it is like shiny, right? But it's the same color as my skin, which is pink, right? I'm like the color of a piglet. So the scar itself is almost invisible, except for it's a little bit shiny. But the only other way you would know that I have a wound is I can't knock on like a window or a door. Look at this bug just landed on me. How gross. See you later. I can't knock on a door. Sometimes it hurts like unbelievably bad because of the way the scar goes over my knuckle. So there's just only really 2 ways that you would ever know that I went through a several month healing process from a massive injury where I was literally looking at my own bone with my own ojos, right? And that's kind of the goal for healing your marriage, right? The goal is to look on the other side of this, however long of counseling or therapy or coaching or whatever, to get on the other side and be like, are you sure they ever had a hard time in their marriage? Because they look great. They look like they're really getting along well, and they communicate really well, and they're super strong. Like how could they have gone through that if they're like this now? And every once in a while you might see something where you go, oh, wait, I can see that maybe there was a wound there at one time, but you never know by how you act 99.99% of the time, right? And what's really cool is that when couples heal and they do this work, and they go through the process of the flushing and the stitching and the taking care of and the pain and all of that stuff, when you see that they did have an injury, it almost always comes out lovingly. It's like a new level of attunement and understanding that they have about the world. And it's not like one of them super pissed off secretly and they're not saying anything. It's not like that. It's not like a maladaptive weird thing. It's more like you see sadness. You see sadness because they walked through something really hard, and but now they're healed, right? So it's this really beautiful combination of an acknowledgement of pain that they've been through, but also this experience opens you up. The experience of healing opens you up to understanding the world at a much deeper level. I know that sounds like super weird and meta and not at all related, but it totally is related. You begin to understand others better. You begin to understand yourself better, and you begin to kind of understand the world in a more holistic and well-rounded way. So anyway, I wanted to talk about what healing was actually like. Again, I love to overlay healing with a physical injury because it's so much easier for us to understand. And then lastly, before we wrap up, I know this is a long episode, but before we wrap up, I talked about using the analogy of learning how to drive a stick shift as the second part of healing. So this is kind of the last, as we're trying to learn new skills. Again, having a hand that was injured for so long, I had to learn how to do everything a different way. Now, I could still use my hand, but I could not use it remotely like I used it before, right? I couldn't reach into a pocket. It just like gives me shivers to think about how painful that was. Couldn't brush my hair, couldn't run my fingers through my hair. It was hard to brush my teeth. Like any small holding a fork was hard, just all that kind of stuff. And so I use this analogy as people are on the sort of like healing side of healing, right? The side where you're actually like making positive changes and stuff is connecting and you're still kind of hurting a little bit, but you're trying to do stuff in a new way. It's like trying to learn how to drive a stick shift. Now, if you have never driven a stick shift car, a manual transmission car, this might not be as helpful as an analogy, but it's hard. It's not easy to learn. You have to factor in a bunch of different things at the same time. So are you on a slant? Is the emergency brake on? If there's a hill, what's the angle? Where does the clutch actually activate? Is it the very end? Is it the whole thing? What are your gears? Is it on the tree? Like there's all these things. Like probably if you don't drive a manual, you have no idea what I just said, but there's like 15 things to consider at the same time. And when you are learning to drive a stick shift car, it is a clunky. Like it's so messy and like the car will jerk and lurch and shudder and like you'll kill the engine 1,000 times and you think you got it and then you go stop at a stoplight and you get stressed out and then you kill it at the stoplight, or you're on a hill. And I mean, shoot, we grew up in Seattle. Seattle is a hilly city, and I would drive my Jetta in Seattle. It was a stick shift Jetta. And I just like burning the clutch out because I was terrified I would roll backwards and hit the car behind me, right? So the process of learning to drive a stick shift is so awkward for a long time, right? It takes a year probably to get proficient at it, to do it well without thinking, and it's sort of like seamless feeling. But that doesn't mean that on the second try of starting a car with a stick shift and putting it into first gear and having it shut off that you're failing. Right? So when you're on your healing journey, think of it like learning how to drive a stick shift. You aren't failing when it stalls out. You're just learning. You aren't failing when you rev the engine way too high on the hill in Tacoma because you're terrified that you're going to hit the car behind you. You're not failing. You're learning. And it's the repetition of the sort of like clunky driving scenario and the awkward like, whoa, I revved it way too high, or it's like almost choking out because I'm too low, like I'm in the wrong gear, right? There's so many great analogies there where if you were to put a marriage healing relationship right next to learning how to drive a stick shift, you'd have a lot more grace for learning how to drive a stick shift than you would for healing your marriage. And that is not right. So let's use these analogies, right? Let's use them to our benefit. If you are walking through coaching or counseling or therapy, and you're actually on the healing end, have grace and think about it like you're driving a stick shift. You got to, keep your injury covered just like you're cutting your hand open with a chainsaw, right? These analogies are here to help you and to guide you and to give you visuals and like active, helpful representations so that when you go out to do these things, you can be far more successful. And again, with the hopes that one day you'll be extremely proficient at driving the metaphoric stick shift of your relationship, or no one will even know that you've been through a huge trauma because you've healed so well. So anyway, like I said, I hope that this helps. If you need coaching, hit us up. Go to anatomyofus.com and sign up for coaching. We'd love to have you, and I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye. Peace.